Before we start, this is the first time we've done an online meeting. I'll be honest, it's a lot different when we're in the office. I much prefer it when we're in the office and I can actually see you in the office and we can actually communicate back and forth. This is a little bit different. So we'll try and get through this as best we can. I'd like to apologize if you can hear the baby in the background. He's eating right now and he's a noisy eater, so hopefully he'll quiet down a little bit. And I apologize in advance for any crying you hear later on when he's going to have his bath. So yeah, it's a bit of a different dynamic. We're not in the office and we're doing a presentation from home. So lots of different challenges we're hopefully not going to face as we go through this. I hope everyone is safe and well. You're all looking after yourselves, looking after each other. These are definitely very challenging times in many different ways. From an organization, we've found our own challenges in different ways, being ultimately we are a small business and that we have operational costs, which some people may want to ask questions about towards the end, and hopefully you've been reading the emails as we've been able to get information out to you. And on a personal level as well, I know for us as coaches, we like to have that interaction with players. And as much as Zoom has been a lifesaver, and now we've been able to still connect with players, you can't replace the real thing on the field. So I know that as much as hopefully the players are missing soccer, missing their interaction with their friends and the coaches, we as coaches are definitely missing the interactions with the players also. So we've been used to it every day now for as long as our careers have been going for. Right, we're now going to put up the presentation. Looks like most people who are going to join the session are now with us. Here we go. Okay, so maybe you've already gone through this after it was sent out to you, but today we're going to kind of go through it, touch on the evaluations. It can be quite confusing as well, and then answer any questions that you may have. So this update may be out of date thanks to the press conference today from the state. But as you know, as of right now, we are away from the fields. We are now on the Zoom platform. We had to transition to this platform to be able to continue to support the players. It was important that we could support the players in the psychosocial element, and obviously opportunities to keep improving their soccer ability as well. We are not yet granted to go back to the fields, although the state has currently opened it up again today. Alameda is at a different stage of opening up. And so with that being the case, we are going to be a little bit behind on maybe other communities or other areas of the state. So we are in constant dialogue with the city because we will be going by what they let us know as far as when we can return. So through this presentation, we're able to provide you with an update on the current situation where we are as of right now, and with our thoughts to move forward. Be able to prepare you for when we do return to the field. The expectations we have of the staff, but also for you as parents and players, because it is going to be a huge team effort from everyone to be able to successfully get back onto the field. And then just before we go into the next few slides, just want to clear up some of the language we'll be using. The state and the counties are reopening through the different stages. As of right now, Alameda is in stage 2, the very beginning of stage 2. We have a phase of return. So we'll be referring to the Fremont as a phase and the state as a stage. So we're able to marry the two together to hopefully make a little bit more sense. So where we are right now, as just mentioned, we're currently at stage 2. We've been allowed to have lower risk workplaces return and open back up again. We are still under the shelter in place order. That hasn't changed. Sorry guys, people do keep adding in, so I will be going back and forth. We are, as just mentioned, considered a hotspot as of right now, so we'll be at the very beginning of stage 2. Speaking with the City of Fremont Recs department, they do not anticipate opening up any facilities until the county is at stage 3, where the higher risk workplaces are able to then start to reopen them. They've given us an anticipated return date of late June. But again, they will also be dictating to us when we can actually get back on the field, and also how we're able to get back on the field as far as participation, group sizes. We have sent this into the city to let them know of our intentions through communications with or NorCal Premier and US Club Soccer. And so we right now have very good communication with the city on how we will be able to return. As we continue to go through this presentation, I just want to make sure that we are all clear that the decisions we're making, these aren't based on what we see in news feeds. These are not based on what our beliefs are. This is all based on what we're getting from the science, the best that we can do from the CDC. And we're very lucky in that on the board, we have relationships with people. I have a very good friend who, I can't remember his exact title, but he is one of the scientists working on a vaccine for the virus. And we also have one of the wives of a board member. Her title is incredibly long, but works in kind of genes, and so has a much better understanding than all of this than what we do as soccer coaches. So they've been a great resource for us to check in with what we're doing as far as returning to play. As you can see where we are right now, we're not going to be returning to play on a field. We will not begin our phase return until technically the latter stages of stage 2. It won't be until the end of stage 3 until we will enter our next phase of return to practice. Then as the order is lifted, that is the time which NorCal will start to bring back its competitions. And again, even at that point, it's going to be on a different level. It may not be, for some of us, not traveling as far, which I'm sure we'll be grateful for. It might be kept very local. But again, that's an issue for NorCal to be working with, and they're doing that as we speak. So this is how our phases are going to be working. Phase 1, again, this is based on what we've got from the city. It's also from who we've been able to reach out for advice, and also from US Soccer and NorCal Premier. There is to be no contact between players. Everything is done individually, so 1 ball per player. No more than 8 participants per group. No more than 32 players per field. By that, we mean a full-size 11v11 field. No more than 32 participants are allowed within that area. Every player must keep 10 feet from each other, including the staff. Coaches will not be able to go over and do individual training with, obviously, an individual. We will be implementing staggered start times, and practices will be no longer than 30 minutes. There will be no sharing of equipment and no sharing of water. Every player must bring their own ball and they must bring their own water. We'll be having 1 entrance and 1 exit, which will affect how we park at the different locations. And we'll also be asking that all parents that you remain in the car if you stay to watch the practice. Obviously, we have players of different age groups. If you need to get out of the car and bring a child closer to the field, obviously safety first when it comes to crossing of the roads and being in the car park, but all parents must wear a mask if they're going to be getting out of the car. And again, this is phase 1. We're going to go through each and every individual phase. We will be having at these entrances and at the exits a drop-off and collection point where, like you've seen at supermarkets, we'll have every 6 yards. We will be having a cone set out for players to form a line as they enter in, so we're not all cramming ourselves and running through at the very same time. We've got to be realistic. These are children. We're going to do our best to make sure that they listen to all the rules and they follow the rules. It is for their health and safety. And this is why it's important that we ask you as parents to help us with this as well. Just remind them on the drive up to practice about the different rules we have for these different phases. Then we'll move into phase 2. Very little changes in phase 2 as far as the structure of 30-minute practice. Again, staggered times. The only difference now is the groups will be able to work as a group of 8 in which they can play in small 4v4 games, but the majority of the practice will still be in an individual sense with a minimum contact as possible. Soccer is a contact sport. Therefore, when you do go into the scrimmages, there is going to be an element of contact. Certain studies have suggested this is from seeing how the European leagues are coming back as far as the Premier League, the Bundesliga, They're suggesting that it is still a safe environment to be playing, as you're not generally close to a person for any longer than 2 seconds. Again, for a lot of this is going to be learning as we go along. This is very new to a lot of us, but we've got to make sure the environment is safe as possible. And so to do that, maintaining as much distance as possible is going to be the way forward. As we then go from the shelter in place, we get to enter phase 3. From here, practice looks as normal. The only difference here in practice is going to be the number of players. Sorry, there's going to be no scrimmaging against other teams. So for example, in the preseason, we would have our senior girls team playing against the 05 girls team purely for fitness reasons in preparation for the season. That will not be able to happen. We'll still be keeping the teams separate in their areas, practicing amongst themselves, but they will be able to scrimmage a little bit more freely within their own groups. Once we get to this phase 3, parents may stay outside the car now. You don't have to stay in the car once to the field. We will ask you to please still wear face masks at this point. That may even be out of our hands. It might be something that the state requires or the city requires, but we will be asking parents now to stay behind all fencing. By all means, bring the child up the entrance to the field, but then please remain behind the fence. And please do your part as well to make sure there is social distancing. Phase 4, we're now back at full practice. There's no restrictions on what we're able to do as far as the curriculum and the sessions we can put on. Teams within Fremont YSC can play against each other in the preseason fitness sessions. We will still be recommending social distancing around the training area. So again, parents, we're going to be asking, can you please stay outside the fence? And something which I think is a good opportunity to move forward within this is to make sure we encourage every player to keep bringing their own water. Limit the chance of needing to use a water fountain. I know players, as they get older, will start to share each other's water by doing fountains themselves from each other's bottles. We're going to be not allowing players to do that. They need to make sure they bring their own water. With living in California, it's an incredibly warm climate. They should have water anyway. So something from this, hopefully we can start to bring positive habits with how we approach our preparedness for playing. So an item I did miss in phase 1 as well. We will be asking players and phase 2 to make sure that they have their cleats on once they leave the car. Again, all this is down to the age. Some players will get changed when they get to the field. They'll put the boots on at that point. Other players are already doing this, coming out of the car, but we're going to be asking that every player, and if you're a senior player that drives to practice, that before you leave the car, you put your boots on, and then we're not leaving items around the field. So we're trying to minimize the chance of any kind of spread of the virus. So how our phases work within the return into practice of the city with the stages. Phase 1 is at the very end of stage 2. Phase 2 of our coming back to play is at the very beginning of stage 3. As we work through stage 3, we will then be rolling out our phase 3. And once the order is lifted and NorCal allow competition, we will then be in phase 4. Again, for those of you who've entered pretty late into the meeting, if you have any questions about what we've seen so far, please put them in the chat function. We have Gavin and Travis on the call, and they are going to be taking down your questions and send those over to me as we get towards the end of the meeting. Sorry, just a few things to fix up here. All good. Okay, so that was how we're going to be addressing the actual play. We're also going to be putting in policies for staff. So within phase 1, one thing we will be doing is making sure all coaches have their own equipment. They have this anyway, but occasionally we will borrow off each other if the number of players of the session changes, or we decide to change the session to suit the number of players, but this will not be allowed to happen. They must use only their own equipment, and they will be spraying down the equipment in between groups entering the facilities. We will also be asking for parents to make sure they're aware of the risks, first of all, of COVID-19, and that they support the reopening of us being able to go back to practice. And we will be putting together a health questionnaire. I will be asking you to please go through this with your child before you come to practice. If there is any instance of COVID-19 within the household, that will be going to the county. That's not something we would be dealing with. The county will then inform us, and then we'll be letting know the group that there will be no practice for 2 weeks from that point of time. Obviously, everything is kept confidential. No one will know who may be the person with the virus or the household. All coaches will be wearing face masks. For players, it will be optional. Different studies have come out and suggested that for younger people, it could increase the chance as they will be touching the face more, trying to grab the mask. Others have suggested when participating in sports, it's difficult to breathe through the masks. So this will be based on the individual's preference. But I think it is important that we do remember, because as we go through this, we seem to change our mindset, a few of us, that the masks are protecting us, they're not, they're protecting others. And so we will be making sure every coach is wearing a mask. They will be sanitized at the entrance to the field and at the exit of the field as well, so players can make sure they clean their hands on the way in and on the way out. We will have staff members helping with players come in, trying to keep the line orderly and with social distancing, and obviously with the way out with the pickup. We will be looking at getting signs available so players know where they're going. We'll also make sure that we get maps sent out to you beforehand so you can see it before you get to the field, so we know where players are going to need to go. Coaches will also be making sure there is attendance throughout this duration of the phases, getting back into it through the Team Snap app. So please, if you have put yourself as participating in a practice and you didn't show up, and so you find that your name has been taken off, please don't change it back to what it was before. We'll be using this for tracking and tracing if we are requested for that information from the local health authorities. We'll also be encouraging players at this point, as it will be a 30-minute practice session, to use the restroom before attending practice, as we will not be having restroom breaks at this time. We want to limit the amount of movement of the players outside the facility. Again, this is for phase 1. So again, please make sure all players use restroom before they come to the field. Phase 2 is exactly the same. Nothing much changes. It is still at a higher risk because of the environment in which we're in. There's a lot of activity, running around, sweating, heavier breathing. There is the 4v4 contact now within the practice as we get to this point. But for the policies we're going to be putting in place and the health and safety regulations on staff, they will be remaining the same through phase 2. As we get into phase 3, as you can see, we start to not limit, but we start to reduce some of the more stricter policies which we put in place as we start to open up, as we go through it. But again, all staff must wear a face mask, even in stage 3. Players, again, it's up to the player and it's up to the parent if they want the player to be wearing a face mask, and all coaches will be spraying down their equipment. Phase 4, we're now pretty much open again. Again, sanitizers were made available. Coaches will no longer need to wear a mask at this point. If we're in stage 4, this is where the shelter at home has been lifted. But again, if the state or the county or the city requires people in public to be wearing face masks, then coaches will now continue to wear those face masks until we've been told otherwise by local health authorities. So an example of how we would be dropping off and picking up at Central Park, and we'll also be doing this for ICP at the same time. As you look at the field at the very bottom where the entrance is, that's where generally most people enter the field right now, the main parking area next to the tennis courts, and the exit is over by the play park. So sorry guys, just get in, message through. As you'll notice, we'll be entering from one side, exiting through the other side. The fields will be split up into up to 8 different training pods for the players, in which they will still be spaced out, but they'll enter in one direction, exit another direction, and we'll be going one group per time. We will be on time finishing, so as soon as a group is done or the time slot is up, then we'll be asking all groups to make sure they're on time as far as leaving, those closest to the fence first moving up. We ask that parents, can you please be on time in this current situation. We're generally quite flexible, around the picking up. We like to see players stay and even practice with older age groups, or get extra practice in after a practice session, even before a practice session. But until we reach phase 4, unfortunately, we're going to have to be very strict with players are not going to be able to guest play. They're going to have to practice with their own team at this point, which would then include staying and practicing with other groups. At the entrance, we'll have cones set out for players to stand next to if there is a need to wait to enter the field. Obviously, if there's no one in front of you, players can go straight in as long as they're keeping the social distancing. And again, parents, that's where we ask for your help and support with that. At the exit, we'll be having cones light up along the fence. So if a parent is not there to pick up a player, we'll be asking the group to go to the fence, stand by a cone, so they keep socially distanced. And then we'll be asking for parents to come over to grab the player so they can come out and leave the facilities. So even though we just covered phase 1, at a standpoint from where we are with the club, if we return to practice and the mandate from the city is that we have to enter within our phase, so the end of stage 2, we will not return to the practice field in phase 1. When we looked, the reason we went through how phase 1 is going to work is because we're going to be taking the same precautions for phase 2. And the reason being is that when we look at the amount of safety precautions that go into going back into the field and the way in which we can structure our practice, there is nothing different to the Zoom sessions we're currently doing with how we would operate in phase 1. There is an argument that players will be on the field, but they still won't be able to proper socially interact with each other because they have to maintain the social distancing, which they can still do on the Zoom calls when they get social time towards the end of the practice. It's still only a 30-minute session. We've been asked to limit the amount of time players are at practice. So we've had to reduce the amount of time which they could be exposed to other people during these phases. And again, the duration of a practice session during phase 1 would be the same as what we're able to do within the Zoom calls. Our other consideration as well is the psychological effect this could have on players. For some players, it would be a positive, and for the coaches, it would be a positive because we want to get back on the fields. But it could also have a detrimental effect. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm getting a message from the board as we're going through the meeting. Okay. Nothing to worry about. Sorry, I was back to the presentation. Yeah, so the other psychological factor it could also have, there was one of fear. So we have to make sure that players right now, especially younger players, they're used to a way of attending the practices in that they're free to roam around. They can run over, hug each other, high five, fist bump, practice the side of each other, have the social gatherings together is something we encourage because youth sports is very social. If we go into this environment where they must sanitize before entering, they must remain in a small 3x3 yard grid to maintain social distance. They can't go over to the friends. They can only be the 30 minutes they need to go out. This can also have a detrimental effect of fear that this isn't a safe environment to be in. So we do have to make sure that we're balancing the two. We see the biggest difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is where they can now interact on the field in the 4v4 scrimmaging, and obviously the 1v1, 2v2s, 3v3s, and so on, as a practice session would allow. So we do see there's a significant difference there in the psychological approach to what we're doing, but also we're here to make sure that we minimize the impacts and make it as safe as possible for players to be returning. This will affect the fees, and at this point I would like to say thank you to everyone that's stuck with us through this. It's been financially challenging, we understand, for a lot of families. It's been financially challenging for us as well as a soccer club, so we greatly appreciate your support and your understanding as we transition to the Zoom format, and you stuck with us. We've been able to award over $6,000 in financial aid during COVID. So since March, we've been able to support those families who have been financially affected at this time and help them through the rest of the season, the remainder of the season. We've also been able to keep staff in employment as well. And we've been able to keep the club going through this difficult and more challenging time than we've kind of faced before as a soccer club. With that, we can now look ahead as far as our club membership fees. So we're able to see the projections, and we can have a look at how we can be affected if there is a second wave, or if we have to remain in phase one, or we move forward into later phases and then again return if there is a second wave of the virus. As of right now, through what we've learned from the city, we anticipate returning in phase two. So again, Zoom is only going to be there as a backup if we need it. Upon the start of the new season, it's going to be the regular fees. We are now back on the field. It's going to be like a normal season, but split up into different groups. While I appreciate we will be at 30-minute intervals for players to begin with, our costs sadly don't change, as we're going to need the fields for just as long. In fact, during this time, our expenses haven't really changed that much. The only thing we haven't had to pay out on is the referees. But thankfully, we've been able to use that money to support the families so the players can continue to play. If we need to return to phase one, then we will start with the online Zoom format, and we will be adjusting those fees. So they'll be at the rate of 50% of what the regular fee is. So training fees will be at 50%. Again, we have a lot of expenses which unfortunately don't get reduced or even taken away when we're not on the field. Such things as our office rent doesn't change. The number of insurances we have, player insurances, keeping staff involved on payroll, very little actually is reduced. And a lot of the expenses which could be regained are in the form of credits. So at this point, if we can't return, we don't see any benefit to those credits until we can be on the field. We also anticipate that next year we have to see a reduction in player participation. After the last recession, there was a reduction of 40% of players. This is slightly different, and this is more of a health concern, but we are sensitive to the economic impacts this has had. We're also anticipating an increase in the amount of financial aid which we will be providing families who need that support. And this year we were able to award over $65,000 before we even hit COVID in financial aid. And that's why I want to say a big thank you to all of you, because it's by all of us coming together we're able to provide that kind of support. To say thank you for your support as well, we have extended the season by 4 weeks. That will be as far as the Zoom format. We are currently putting together a free cyber camp as well the week following the 4 weeks of extended practice. And for all those players who did stay with us throughout the duration of the program, we are putting together limited edition training shirts, and we'll also be giving out our club hoodies as well. That information will be coming out in probably 3 to 4 weeks, as we do need to make sure the other vendors are able to support what we want to do to give back. And once they can, we'll be able to get order forms out to you guys. If we do return and we go straight into Zoom from the very beginning, then you can choose at this point not to participate in those sessions. The only thing that we ask is that you do commit to the registration fee, but we will cancel your monthly training fees until we enter phase 3. Once we enter phase 3, at that point, then the training fees will come back in. So if you don't feel Zoom is right for you, although I would strongly encourage it, there's a lot of benefits to the Zoom practices. You can register and not join in with those Zoom practices, and not join in with practice until we enter phase 2. If we've already started in phase 2, phase 3, or we've moved through the phases and we have to go all the way back down to phase 1, having already started the program, then the cancellation policy will be as per normal, where if you cancel during a training block, then that training block does need to be paid for, and also the one-time cancellation fee. If we do return back down to phase 1, again, we'll then reduce the rate down to 50%. We have a better chance now to be able to look forward and be able to budget accordingly for what we anticipate is going to be a more challenging financial year. You're not subject to a full season contract. We've never put full season contracts in place. We've always asked that people do honor the full season, as it does have effect on team placements, players, and obviously how we're able to operate as a soccer club. But unlike most clubs, we've never asked for large sums in 2-3 blocks, because we understand players might want to play other sports, they might get burnt out. So we do understand there should be an opportunity for players to leave if needs be. Okay, so the evaluation process. For those of you who have been with the club before and been to our evaluations, you'll see that they're big events where we can have over 150 players on the field, everyone's interacting, moving around. That's just unrealistic at this point to be able to put on such an event. From a professional coach standpoint and from running an organization, I would love to see evaluation events be done for good. If your club is organized appropriately, you shouldn't need a large evaluation event. If you have not seen in the space of 12 months of play a child's development and you've had to spend an hour on the field to make up your mind if you think the child's developed, then there is something very wrong within the structure of your club. There should be free movement of players. The way we operate as a club is the coaches do speak to each other. We are aware of players who could be moving between the different teams based on their current rate of development or the potential in which a player is showing. So we do have those conversations, and that's when we do ask players to come out and attend more practices if they're able to do it within their weekly structure, and also to come and guest play with teams as well. So that is something we actively do the whole time. So for us, no evaluation event isn't a challenge as far as the soccer players and the development and being able to know where to assign players. We also don't believe that if you've been on a 4-month rest period from participating in soccer and the first thing you want to do is get out and play, to be put into a situation where it's perceived to be of pressure and that you need to perform, we don't believe putting players into that environment is going to be beneficial at all. The whole point of trying to get back to the field in the safest way possible is so players can release some less stress and the psychological challenges they've had from being within that shelter in place. So this is how we're going to be changing our evaluations for this season. And again, I would love to say for the future, but we are dictated by, unfortunately, how everyone else operates within the area. All returning players to the competitive program will initially be assigned back to the teams. This will be the very first starting point of how we'll be going through the evaluation process. At this point, we don't know who will be returning. This is why we ask, and it's important that people returning are registering for what was the evaluation event, because we're basing returners off those numbers and off those registrations. So far, we've got just short of 300 players already registered to return next season. And there are a lot of new players as well. So we're looking forward to welcoming those players to the program. But as of right now, returning players will be immediately assigned to the team from the 2019-20 season. Once we get to the deadline and once we know who's registered for the evaluations, we'll be able to look at the rosters. We'll then be able to move the players which we feel would either benefit from moving between the different teams to suit the needs they need of right now. And then after we've done that, that's when we'll know then what players will be registering for which teams. So the initial process is you'll be back to your assigned team. Following that, you will then be moved. We will contact the players who need moving, and from then we'll be returning to practice. For those players new to the program, as soon as we're able to return to practice safely, we'll be inviting those players out to practice so they're able to have their evaluation with us in person. And it's more of a, I can't think of the word, but more of a less stress, a stress-free kind of environment for the player to be participating in. We don't want players to feel stressed from evaluation. They should be there to play and enjoy the sport. So that's what we're aiming for, and that's our objective as a return. Once we've then got the players knowing which teams they'll be assigned to, if you're new to the program, we'll be emailing you out the registration form for the brand new season. So to summarize, it's going to be register for the evaluations. We then, as staff, will assign all the players back to the previous teams. We will then be moving the players we feel need to be moved, contacting those players and letting them know about the movement. Then when we return to the field, adding the players who are new to the program to the appropriate rosters. Slight change for the 2004 boys. As you are now entering the senior age groups, the 2004 boys will be going between those we feel are at a certain level will be joining the senior team, and other players will remain with the 04s, and they will be what we consider a team that's next to us, where we'll be monitoring both. So now you're starting to enter what is seen as not a professional players aren't professional, but a professional structure, as far as there's going to be movement between the two. For those of you in the season with us last year in the senior age groups, if we see players from the younger age group, so it would then be the 05s, or from the 04 boys, we'll be asking them to come and practice with us once a week as well, as we have now had our seniors act as if it's what you would consider a professional team in the way they're structured and organized. So as soon as you get to U17, we no longer have that age group, it's U19. And from our professional standpoint, and that for development, if you're good enough to be at a certain level, no matter your physical size, no matter your age, as long as it's within appropriate and safe boundaries, then you'll play for that old stage group. The timelines for this, we're asking they can please all sign up to the evaluation by June the 21st. We would like to have all those rosters then completed within that week. Before we send out your registration forms, we will hold more virtual meetings, which will be replacing the meeting we would usually have in the office, where we can talk about the structure of the program, our methodologies, youth soccer as a culture as a whole, as the club works and operates, and how the season is going to be working moving forward. And by that time, we should have more information as to what phase we will be entering in. I strongly recommend for people to, even if you've been to that meeting before, to log in and be involved in the pre-season meeting. It's the best opportunity we have to communicate the philosophy of the program and how the long-term development works for the different players. Competitive season registration then will open on July the 1st with a deadline to register for July the 24th. The season starts and we resume back at practice at July the 27th. The deadline to register, if you don't make the July the 24th deadline, it doesn't mean you cannot register at any time. You can register later, but your spot will be released. So if there is a player which will be moving between teams and a roster is full and we believe there is another player that could make that step, then we'll be having that player take that spot. We need to have all this in place, as a lot of the guys, if you can please stay on mute. We need to have all of this in place because when it comes down to the operations of a soccer club, we all really need to have our permits in for the new season as far as the fields go. And NorCal registration has already opened up for competitions, and they have their own deadlines. So we need to be able to meet those deadlines also. And their deadline for registration is currently set at August the 1st. So if we don't believe a team is going to be returning because people haven't registered, then we're not going to be entering that team. If players then decide to join, then it would mean they're practicing without the opportunity to play because we haven't had the on-time registrations. We've postponed our registrations a month later this season because we do want to give people a bit of a rest with the finances. It is challenging right now, we understand. So we want to give a bit of a breathing space for everyone, and hopefully we can see more people returning to work also during that time. So we want to try and do our best as we can to, again, be aware and sensitive to the needs of everyone as best as we can. So that is the end of the presentation. Gav, if you can send me over your questions, and I'll now work through those questions. Okay, so how does the evaluations work? I think we answered that one. If you still have any questions, the chat is still open. So if you have a specific question, if there's a part of the evaluations you didn't understand as you went through it, you can still add them on there. Gavin is still on the phone call. As far as an idea of when we are allowed to return as to phase 4 is going to depend on a lot of things outside of our control. The only thing we can control is how we approach returning safely. And so with that, we are going to be going by what the CDC recommends. We're also going to be going, and well, we have to, by what the city recommends. So if the city tell us that we must remain in phase 3 because we've already presented this to the city, then we'll have to remain in phase 3. We can't be influenced by other clubs around us. We all run differently. Cities are facing this in different ways as far as the numbers as well. Within Alameda, I live in Dublin. I know that our situation has been a little bit less as far as the virus spreading in this area. So what they do in Dublin is going to be different to Fremont, even though we're in the same county, because there is going to be a time when it comes out the city's opening. So what we'll do is we're in constant communication with the city, and as soon as we can return, we will definitely be moving through the phases as it is safe. We anticipate a return to phase 3, which will be regular practice for the teams. They can't play other teams within the club. Phase 4 would be when you start to play against other clubs, and that is with NorCal, and their schedule for returning to games isn't until the start of September following Labor Day. So we do have time on our side. We are still 2 months out, 3 months out from the possibility of any games being played. Thermal scanners, we have discussed this as in the board meetings and the coaches meetings. What we decided to ask is that for you as parents, if you can do those questionnaires before you enter the field and be able to take that part of checking the players' temperatures. What we don't, if we're still going to have 64 players arriving at a location, the last thing we want to have is a group congestion. They are young players, so to have them be patient and standing and keeping social distancing is going to be very difficult to begin with. So to have them stood around waiting to be scanned and then enter is going to be very challenging to keep everyone separated. We're also very aware of we have to reduce practice to 30 minutes. We don't want to have to pull players into a practice area for 30 minutes, then find we're on the field for 10 minutes, and then we've now got to start leaving. So we want to make sure that we keep it safe before anything else. And we're also aware of everyone else's time and the procedure that goes into making sure that it is safe. So you will be sent a questionnaire from us. You don't have to hand this questionnaire in to us. We are relying on the parents, and that goes for the staff as well, to be able to support the way we're able to return and to be able to take this seriously and support us in what we're doing. The 30-minute sessions, it's going to be your normal as of right now, but this is something we as a staff will again have to work on once we know who's registered. Another reason why we need to know who's anticipating coming back is for us to be able to put together the practice schedules. It would be 30 minutes from when you would usually practice. So for example, 07 Boys Elite would usually practice on a Wednesday at 7:30. The group will be split into two. One group practice for 30 minutes. That group leaves. Next group then comes in. So we will be trying to keep the same practice schedule as far as the amount of times you practice. The Thursday session is obviously something we will need to address, as that is the free play, which is not going to be able to resume until phase 4. So we will look at maybe we have to spread out over different locations, and it will just be an additional normal practice session. But we will look into that, and we'll be finding a way of continuing that Thursday session as best as we can within that scrimmaging format. Practice fields are going to remain the same. It is going to be ICP in Central Park. We don't have any plans to move anywhere else. We take up a large amount of space at both locations. So again, that is something we anticipate and continuing to do. And again, that is going to be something in which it's going to be affected by the amount of players that do return to the program. So I've got a question. Why are we not returning to practice after phase 4? I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about what that question means. After phase 4, we're continuing as normal. So once we're through the phases and the stages, we're back to normal. If the person has submitted that question, if I haven't quite answered that the way you were hoping for me to answer, if you would like to resubmit it, that would be of great help to us, so I can make sure I answer the question appropriately. But yeah, following phase 4, we resume as per normal. Just scrolling through some of your questions. Okay, if you're able to send them through as you read them, that would be great. Okay, I think I see the question. So why would we not wait until phase 4 to resume? The reason, I'll be honest, again, we're going to go by what we get from the CDC, what the county is recommending to us. And if anyone is not comfortable in returning to practice, then obviously please don't return if you have any concerns. I'm split. I've got a 3-month-old baby. So for me, my child is in the category which is going to be very risky if they were to catch it. So for me, it's a big risk trying to even want to come back. I know some people have grandparents living with them as well, and so we completely understand the sensitivity around the safety of what it is that we're trying to do. The reason we're coming back before phase 4 is that we're told it will be safe to return as long as you take these precautions. But again, that's why I'm recommending that if anyone is not comfortable, they don't have to return during that phase. It's the reason why we're not going to return in phase 1. I feel that if it is still that risky at phase 1 in the stages of reopening through the counties, then we shouldn't be returning to the fields. And again, what we can do on Zoom is just the same as what we're going to be able to do at the field. So that's the reason behind we would be staying in Zoom throughout phase 1. Goalkeepers, that will not come back until phase 4. Up until phase 3, everyone stays within their own team. So we won't be taking players from a team to then go mix in during the goalkeeper practice, as that way we're going to be starting mixing players in, and then when they return to their own team, if there was to be a case, then it could mean many teams have to stop practicing, whereas it would only be one team that would need to do the 2-week quarantine. It would also be, if, for example, one of my teams, there was to be an outbreak of COVID, it would also mean that I myself would have to be home for 2 weeks. So that one individual or those teams from the coach would have to return to the Zoom practices if any staff member was to have to go into quarantine for that 2 weeks. Unfortunately, no, we can't come to practice early yet. Phase 3, we will assess the distances that are available to us on the field, and we'll let you know ahead of time. I know I push all the players in all of my teams to go to practice early. I even ask them to stay late sometimes, just to do a little bit of extra juggling, dribbling, 1v1s, ball manipulation. I know a lot of players enjoy doing that as well, but we just still have to be aware of the social distancing. Once we enter phase 4, there should be no problem with players coming in early and staying after the practice, shooting any goals that are available. So that won't be a problem until we get to phase 4. Yeah, I did see the news today of summer camps are allowed to open up through the summer for groups of 12. The city have no intention of opening up fields at this point anyway, because they're taking a more precautious stance to returning. If it is a group of 12, which is allowed to return, then obviously we'll have to adjust what we're doing to a group size of 12. My early understanding, I tried to do a bit of last minute research once I got that notification that this has been sent out today. My understanding is that this is for summer camps, and this hasn't been for actual soccer clubs. I know down in San Diego, they're pushing heavily, and the mayor of San Diego, I believe she is the mayor, lobbied hard to get soccer open in the area because they feel they're ahead of everyone else right now in reopening. So they may be entering their phase a little bit earlier than us. So as far as Alameda coming out and saying we can open up to 12, my current understanding, it is for camp programs. But again, as soon as we learn more from the city, we'll be able to adjust our return to phases if we need to, if we're not within the guidelines. And we're just going to have to be very flexible as different rules change as we go through the start of the season. These rules are also very important because our insurances with US club soccer will only be valid if we're within the county guidelines. If we start having groups of 14 going out because we feel that it might be safe, and the county have not come out or the city have not come out and officially said we can do that, our insurances are null and void. One, we wouldn't do that anyway because the priority right now is health. But we are going to be dictated to by what the authorities are letting us do as well. I see a question. Players born in 2014. That's the training pool for 2014. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions, make sure I've answered everything. Yes, this has been recorded, and following this presentation, we are going to put a recording on our website. This presentation is also on our website and was emailed out at the start of the week. But again, I will be sending this out again following the meeting. It'll come through your TeamSnap accounts. For those who are going to be registering for the first time, you will be sent a link to our website, as we're not able to attach documents through that structure with how TeamSnap is set up. And also, I'll be looking at the recording and how I can put this online as well. Sorry, still scrolling through. If I've missed, or me and Gavin have missed any questions, again, please feel free to add them at the bottom of the chat. There's quite a few questions in history. There's a good chance that we may have missed something. We want to make sure that we answer everyone's questions the best we can now, so we can get back to you as quick as we can in an appropriate time. Abia, I wouldn't be admitting that you've hijacked a meeting. Okay, so just to round up as well, because of the fact that we've had to go between Zoom meetings and on-field meetings. It's not the same as being on the field. As a coach, it's definitely not. It's strangely more tiring and more difficult coaching through Zoom than it is having 18 players on a field. But there are a lot of benefits that can come through the Zoom platform. I know not every player likes them. It's difficult. We've seen the psychological challenges this has had for players. It's very difficult for them to get motivated. This is unfortunately due to the stay at home. I know myself, I'm challenged with just doing certain tasks, which usually I'll be able just to snap into and do through the motivation. we released a presentation in which we were on an educational conversation with Borussia Dortmund. Borussia Dortmund are one of the biggest clubs in the world. They're a German Bundesliga team and have one of the best academies in the world also. For me, it's great to know that we're operating on a similar wavelength to these massive academies. But the positives which players can get from this is just being able to visually see a friend. Zoom enables us to do that in a safe environment. So it gives us the chance to be able to support the psychosocial development of a player. Youth soccer is more than just being able to kick a ball and kick a ball well. That's probably, in the grand scheme of everything, not even the top 3 or 4 things we should be looking at. We should be developing individuals who are experiencing different life skills, learning how to work with each other, becoming confident to be able to speak around the peers, being able to become confident to speak to adults. We're looking at them taking accountability for their actions. There's a lot of skills within youth sports you can learn, which is more than just kicking a soccer ball. With the Zoom, it's giving them something they should be committed to. They give themselves a schedule, they're committed to being on that Zoom call. It's going to give them structure to the day. It's going to give them something to aim for to get through the day. It's difficult to get through the days at time. This allows them a chance to say, right, at 6 p.m. I have my meeting. I need to make sure I'm there. I need to make sure that I'm logging in. Although they can't necessarily work on passing, long distance striking, what Dortmund seen very early on was a big increase in the players' ball manipulation and dribbling ability. Youth player, that should be the main focus. You want them to be an individual. They want them to be confident in having the ball at their feet. Zoom meetings gives us a great opportunity for players to be able to do that. So for those of you who've been following our pitches, I can't remember what it's called now, pitches, patios, and parks. I got that completely wrong. I've been doing the videos every week. Parks, pitches, and patios. Everything is being based around ball manipulation. It's being based around the elements of a youth individual player and dribbling. So we've been able to still provide the coaching needed for players through the Zoom meetings. It's just not quite the same, we understand, because we're not in person. We've also made sure that it's within a 3x3 yard area, so players are able to perform this. We've had some great videos in their living rooms, in their kitchens, in backyards, if you're lucky enough to have a backyard, outside the front door. So it's been great to see how players have also been able to problem solve this as well. Early on, we were all playing with toilet roll. And then we've seen some players dribbling around their teddy bears on the floor or a couple pairs of shoes. And to be honest, this is how we pretty much learned back growing up in Europe. Those learning in South America, you learn by shooting at goalposts made of school bags. So I think this is a great opportunity for players to realize there's so much they could do as far as practice at home with a Zoom call or without a Zoom call. And just yesterday I posted on our website, I'd recommend taking a look, is the Grundlers, Ezekiel and Mackenzie, showing how they've been practicing at home and the commitment they put into it. And I know both players are always early at practice, and that's great. You've really seen them developing that much quicker than if they only stayed committed to their only team practices. If you're ever told by a coach that they're going to develop your player to be the next best player in the world or to get to college, the coach is lying to you. The coach is there to give you guidance. The coach is there to provide support. The coach is there to give the knowledge and understanding as and when needed. It's up to the player. If a player doesn't want to learn, a player's not going to learn, no matter who you put them in front of. You're going to have Pep Guardiola and a player that only puts 5% effort in, he's not going to world beater. You can put any lower level coach, but with a player that gives 100% and puts that much effort into their own practice away, and they will develop, improve. So it's down to the individual player with how much effort they put in. So the Zoom meetings are still beneficial for the players. So no, if a player is not comfortable returning to a later phase, that is not a problem. We're very aware and sensitive to how everyone's going to approach this differently. Same with our staff as well. Even if I've spoke to staff already, I've let them know if there's a staff member not comfortable returning, they don't have to return. Our first priority is everyone's safety. And like I said, I have a baby in the house. I'm hesitant to return as well, to be honest, because I won't be able to live myself if he gets sick. All we ask for players to do if they intend on returning is to do the registration. That's the initial $200 registration. Those costs are going to help the club get through this time if we have to go back to a Zoom platform. If you don't want to return until a later phase, then you don't have to pay training fees until you return. Okay, so unless we are on the field practicing, then you pay your registration, but we will not be charging training fees. If we return, like I mentioned earlier, from a later phase to an earlier phase, in other words, phase 1 with Zoom, then training fees will be reduced to 50%. So yeah, if a player is not comfortable, again, don't feel like you have to go. We don't want any player putting their health at risk because they feel that there's not going to be a spot for them. As we get to the later phases, phase 4, for example, or maybe even phase 3, and then we can discuss that as an individual basis, and we can reach out to the families and ask, maybe there's something we can do which will make you feel more comfortable. Again, we're going to be as comfortable, we're going to be as sympathetic, understanding, as flexible as we can as we go through this process. Okay, any more questions? Have we missed anyone's question? If you'd like to enter it now into the chat. Just check in Garen's text messages. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's been great to see so many people come on the call. I think I'll need to do this more often as far as the pre-season meetings, so we can get you all involved in those pre-season sessions before we find ourselves onto the field. Me and Gavin are going to stay on here for maybe another 10 minutes. So if there's anyone who wants to hang back and add an extra question into the chat, you're more than welcome to. We are going to send this out. I am recording it. I will be posting this. I'll have to learn that as soon as I get off the call and post it. And we'll also be resending the presentation also. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, if you can please send those questions to your coaches to begin with, that would be great, because they may be able to answer it and before it gets to me. If not, then they'll be passing any questions to me and I'll be able to get back to you as well. So to round off, please make sure you're all staying safe, staying healthy. We are going to also be introducing for the players, I probably should have said this a bit earlier, a nutrition tracker. It's not going to be a nutrition plan from us. It's going to be something for players to write down their own nutritional habits so they can reflect on how healthy they're eating, because health is going to be a huge component in being able to get through this virus. The healthier you are, the better we can fight it off and come through it all. So that is also something else we're going to be adding. We'll also be adding a pre-season fitness, 4-week pre-season fitness plan, which will be age appropriate to the teams also, and that will come out 4 weeks before the very first start date of the season. So I think that covers everything. I hope everyone's been listening. It's very strange doing this to a computer screen, I've got to be honest. I noticed myself looking around because I felt lonely. But again, thank you. And me and Gavin will stay on the conversation for another 10 minutes. Okay, thank you very much.